Hello there. Welcome to Lunch with Art, the Visual Arts Edition. My name is Galen Todd, and today I'm going to introduce you into the world of collage. Collaging is kind of grungy. It's got a lot of information, but it's really fun. It stems from a popularity in the 1960s from the rock era, such as Lonely Hearts Club Band from the Beatles, the Revolver, and then it became very popularized in the fine arts by pop artist Andy Warhol. Since then, it's evolved through the 70s and the 80s to kind of give color and vibrancy to urban areas like New York, rock clubs like the CBGB, and it's kind of grungy, it's kind of raw, but it's my favorite medium, and I want to share with you how you can put these simple techniques into practice to really make a nice finished product. Before we start, here's an example of one of the pieces that I've done recently. It's an old toy that my son outgrew, and when I saw it, I thought maybe I'll give it that nice, grungy collage look that I've fallen in love with. As you can see, it has different shapes and different sizes, so we're gonna go through 3 techniques to where you can recreate something like this at home. The first technique is tearing, and what that does to your paper. The second technique is cutting with tools and what that does. And then the third technique is if you start to grow your scale and what you want to collage onto your surface, what techniques you need to do to make sure that that is complete and finished as well. Keep in mind that all of these steps can be used interchangeably, but let's go through each one of them specifically. The first one is a simple tear. What I like to do is highlight that if there's something that you want on the magazine, you have 2 options. You can either cut them out with a tool or you can tear them. The tear is organic and the cut is more geometric. So with the tear, you may lose a little bit of control. So you do need to be okay with losing some of the information. But with that tear, you get a real thin, nice white line that gives it a pretty cool feature. So with Mr. Chuck here, we're gonna do a tear. I like to make sure that I tear on all 4 sides. And just by the nature of it, I get a shape that is kind of like controlled chaos, like I said before. With collaging, you can either be very strategic or you can just do what I like to call freeform. In front of me, I have a few selected pieces of material that are torn on all sides, and I want to teach you the right way to get them onto your surface. Fun fact, it doesn't have to be a canvas like this. You can refurbish furniture, walls like wallpaper, practically anything if you have the right materials. My favorite material to use is a product called Mod Podge. Mod Podge is not only a glue, but it's also a sealant. You can use it on the back side of your paper, as well as a sealant on the front side to give it either a matte or a gloss finish. So what I'm gonna do is work with my gloss for this one. This is, side note, it's pretty messy, so as long as you're okay with getting a little sticky, you're gonna have a lot of fun. All right. With Mod Podge, you are going to be pushing through the whole entire piece of paper, so make sure that your base is something that you don't really care about because it's going to get messy. So we'll take our first item here. It works with a brush. And what you want to do is you want to apply this Mod Podge evenly across the entire thing. Let's place it. You want to press down here in the middle. And then what I like to use is a old card. Looks like good for a free car wash. And you want to push from the middle and push out in all 4 directions. What that does is it avoids bubbles. And if you know anything about collaging, those bubbles can be very annoying. And it really takes away from that finished professional look that we're looking for. All right. So I've done a couple collage workshops before here at the Bailey, and I found that everyone that participated found it to be very therapeutic, very enjoyable, Just maybe taking a break from the rigors of drawing and painting and what comes with that. And you're just sort of hanging out, applying paper to canvas. And what else I like to highlight is it gives it this feeling of like instant satisfaction. Because you didn't draw, you didn't paint it, you're just applying it. The fun thing about collage as well is what you do choose can instantly start to tell a story. For example, just the few pieces that I chose are based around music. Got graffiti, so they're based around kind of like an urban major city environment. In just a matter of minutes, I'm telling this story. Whereas if I were to approach, how do I draw or how do I paint a hip hop artist from New York, that would take hours and days, and I just did it in 2 minutes. You can keep a specific theme, or you don't have to. And it doesn't have to be grungy, it can be basically whatever your general interests are, or whatever you have lying around the house. Also with collage, you can keep in mind your color selection. Here, for example, I've chosen black and white, but I also have a lot of color. Sometimes it's fun to limit yourself to just certain colors. And I guess what people noticed is that collage is no different than any other medium. Whatever story you're trying to tell, you're just doing it kind of a different route. So the only other thing I want to highlight here with this piece, before we move on to the next one, is that by doing the tears, this allows a lot of organic shapes, which even though we don't have full control over, it has a certain feel to it, a certain mood. And you'll see that as we move on to the next stage, it has a whole different kind of feel to it. The next technique is how we're going to create geometric shapes out of our collage. For example, you can use scissors, or before, like I was using an X-Acto knife. With the X-Acto knife, what you're doing is you're creating these hard edges. What it also avoids, what we were talking about before, is that thin little white tear that goes across when you rip it is avoided when you use either scissors or an X-Acto knife. So I'll show you an example right now. So just by using a sharp tool, now we have hard edges that we can use to create different shapes within our piece. So we'll have a few more examples here. So we've already learned how to use the Mod Podge. Another tool that we can use is also Elmer's glue stick. The reason I said glue stick and not glue is because the glue stick is applied evenly, whereas your Elmer's glue that comes out, you can use, but you're gonna have to rub it in smooth. The main thing is to have an even surface, because you want to avoid bubbles. Bubbles that are air bubbles in collage are very annoying, and they, for whatever reason, they just don't look good. So we want to avoid those at all costs. So now we have the glue on the back. We want to use the same technique. And with these hard edges, we can get ourselves up to the corner and cover it completely. So I'm going to go ahead and use the same technique with the card here. Push from the middle. Push out all those air bubbles. And the main term that we want to use here is that it has more of a geometric feel as opposed to the one before, which has an organic feel. So let's put down a couple more and I'll show you what I'm talking about. When you've used a tool to cut, you can line them up perfectly side by side. And you can get more surface area covered quicker. Now I have to to be honest, that with collaging, you have to be okay with losing some of your material, some of your content on the front of the surface, but it's worth it because sometimes in those negative spaces where you lose that information and get something on top of it, you can actually create something pretty cool. So let's go ahead and place this sort of over both of them, overlapping, and I'll show you something pretty interesting. Just from that overlap, now I've created a line here, a line here, a line here, and a line here. Only by gluing it. So as you can see, like I was saying before, Collage has this really cool way of giving you this instant feeling of completion. Again, telling a narrative by your selection very quickly. Now that I've got you hooked on Collage, you're probably going to want to move on to something a little bit larger, maybe a more grandiose scale. If it's the backside of a skateboard or the backside of your bed. As your scale gets larger, the main thing you want to do is avoid those air bubbles. So I'm going to teach you a trick on how to do that. Flipping through the magazines, I found this really cool image of Bob Marley, and I think it's going to stand for itself. So I want to get it on this 6x6 surface area, and you would think it'd be as easy as just laying it on top. But that's not the case. So with the help of the ruler, we're going to cut it out to the shape of the square here. And the square I have here is 6x6, but this really relates to any scale that you have at home. Great, so I want to apply this to the surface, but again, we want to avoid those air bubbles. So what I would suggest, and the trick that you're going to learn from me today, is to go ahead, cut this at a 45. Now, because I think the picture is beautiful by itself, I want to make sure that I don't get too much of that tear effect, which leaves that white line. And by cutting it at a 45 with the credit card technique, you can lay it on there. And even though it may have a really little line down the middle, from anyone looking at it, they won't even be able to see it. So again, this is where the technicality comes in. So you want to place it, line it up. The first thing you want to do before you push down is make sure that you're in the middle, right? And push out on all four sides. It's kind of like applying grip tape to a skateboard. Sometimes I like to line it up just a little off, kind of gives it this like glitch feel, but for this example, try and line it up as best we can. then again, the center of this image here is right here. Push out. 4 directions, kind of like a compass. Lay that on. Nice and smooth. And obviously, if you're a perfectionist, take a little bit more time to make it perfect. But main technique that you take home with you is that we don't have any of those air bubbles. Now you can see a nice flat surface. So now that you have the techniques down, you can be selective, like only black and white, or maybe vibrant colors. It has a lot of great effects for home decor, like just a couple accents on an already finished piece gives it that little extra pop of originality. Great. The last example I want to show you is an ode I did to the Beatles. So we can say it was popular, the collaging in the 60s. I used the Mod Podge to get it down with no bubbles. I did a Mod Podge on the back side to give it its finish. The last thing I want to tell you before we end our session today is that if you really want it to last for duration and it's going to have some industrial use to it, go ahead and invest in a varnish, either paint one or a spray one. That's going to ensure that it doesn't come off the paper. This isn't going anywhere because of the varnish. In conclusion, I hope you got inspired to do some collaging of your own. And maybe you're a little intimidated by the materials. Just keep in mind, as long as you have an old credit card, maybe a glue stick lying around, you can do one of your own at home. This was done with just a piece of cardboard and one magazine found around the house. So I hope you got inspired, and we want to see your finished product. We'll see you next time with Lunch with Art.